everyone, and welcome back to Pod Talk. I'm your host, Becky Holland, and I'm so glad you're here. For today's episode, I'm switching things up a bit. In earlier episodes, I highlight a variety of podcast shows connected by a subtle, unexpected thread. But this time, the connection couldn't be clearer. I'm recommending 3 different podcasts that investigate the same catastrophe from different vantage points and through the voices of different victims. The shows today include American Scandal, Ripple, and Lawless Planet. All 3 of these shows examine the 2010 BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, one of the most devastating environmental disasters in modern history. American Scandal exposes the systemic negligence, corporate failures, and reckless shortcuts that set the disaster in motion. Ripple turns to the human and ecological aftermath, how the spill reshaped lives, livelihoods, and entire ecosystems. And Lawless Planet frames major environmental catastrophes as true crimes against the planet, dedicating 2 gripping episodes to the chain of events that led to the BP spill. You guys, this episode takes what BP hoped to keep hidden below the surface to light, and you don't want to miss it. So first, a little background. If you're like me, you might only have a vague memory of the event itself. For 87 days, the Macondo oil well, sitting a mile beneath the ocean's surface and 41 miles off the Louisiana coast, gushed crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico, a sea that has fed generations and has held storms in equal measure. Its name comes from the fictional literary town from Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, Macondo, a town that was born of ambition and hope, but destined for ruin. The parallel is almost poetic. Both Macondos, the well and the town, began as symbols of grand ambition and bold pursuits of prosperity, ultimately marked for catastrophe. Even the name seems to echo through the void, a quiet foreshadowing of reckless desire and arrogance, and the disastrous consequences that followed. British Petroleum, or BP, has a long history of prioritizing profit and rapid expansion in ways that have repeatedly compromised safety and accountability. As early as the 1990s, the company showed a troubling pattern of cutting corners, downplaying risks, and ignoring internal warnings, behaviors that fostered a culture where safety concerns were minimized and responsibility was often deflected. This pattern set the stage for the conditions that ultimately contributed to the Macondo well disaster. 5 years before the catastrophic Macondo well explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, BP experienced another major disaster, a series of blasts at its Texas City refinery that killed 15 workers and injured more than 170 other people. Independent investigations by both the U.S. Chemical Safety Board and OSHA found that BP had significant organizational and safety deficiencies. Their reports highlighted a pattern of aggressive cost-cutting, inadequate operator training, and poor communication, failures that directly contributed to the refinery tragedy and revealed deeper systemic problems within the company. So, by the mid-2000s, BP was just one of several major oil companies chasing dwindling reserves. Those shallow, easily accessible fields were largely gone. Meanwhile, global demand continued to climb. To keep up, many companies explored deep water projects, turning to hard-to-reach, riskier places, drilling deeper than ever before in pursuit of new sources of crude. While these wells promised enormous reserves and financial rewards, they also carried far greater safety, environmental, and financial risks. Like many others, BP fostered a corporate culture that put speed and profit ahead of safety, neglecting equipment, the environment, and most tragically, its own workers. So in 2006, another major disaster struck, the BP Prudhoe Bay pipeline spill, which released roughly 260 gallons of oil into Alaska's fragile northern tundra and wetlands, disrupting ecosystems that recover only slowly. The spill was carried by a quarter-inch hole in a corroded pipeline, a problem that had been well known and repeatedly flagged for years. Yet, BP failed to act, allowing negligence to set the stage for a preventable environmental catastrophe. Yep, 2010 BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. And so, Macondo. American Scandal, a great podcast series, which is my first recommendation today, is hosted by the award-winning Lindsey Graham. Nope, not the senator, who's built an impressive catalog of investigative podcasts. Known for his meticulous research and rich narrative style while weaving in moments of dramatization, which personally is something I don't usually love in a podcast show, here his steady voice and careful execution make it work. As the title suggests, this show dives into major scandals throughout American history. Topics include business scandals, political, environmental, societal, medical, and more, unpacking the corruption, deceit, greed, fallout, and long-term consequences behind each story. Deepwater Horizon is the show's 68th season, dedicating 5 gripping episodes to the BP oil spill and the catastrophic chain of failures that led to it. In my opinion, you should go check out American Scandal: Deepwater Horizon and decide for yourself who bears the blame for this American tragedy. Ripple, from APM Studios in Western Sound, my second recommendation for you today, is a powerful, long-form investigative podcast that uncovers the prolonged, often overlooked consequences of the BP oil spill on Gulf Coast communities, the environment, and public health. As the title suggests, host Dan Leon traces the ongoing ripples of harm, revealing that this story is far from over and its impacts are still unfolding in real time, even today. Drawing on extensive research, Leon brings forward the hidden costs of cleanup efforts, exposes systemic failures by both BP and government agencies, and finally gives voice to the human and ecological victims who were largely ignored once the spill was declared over. Some of the harshest consequences fell on those whose livelihoods were directly affected by the disaster, primarily fishermen. Many were hired by BP under the Vessels of Opportunity Program, or VOO, to help with cleanup after fisheries were closed. These professional fishermen had no formal training in oil spill response and, in many cases, had little choice but to join the efforts to put food on the table and pay the bills. To make matters worse, workers were exposed directly to oil and chemical dispersants without any hazardous materials training and were denied basic protective gear, all for the sake of BP's reputation. As one former VOO worker recalls, "We were out there in the sun, covered in oil and dispersants, and they didn't give us any masks or gloves. You just did what you had to do to get paid." And the danger didn't stop at the cleanup. Many workers faced denied or delayed medical treatment, and years later, long-term health issues from chemical exposure continue to affect them. For reasons never fully documented, but perhaps unsurprising given the lengths BP went to cover up the spill and avoid responsibility, local medical specialists often refused to treat or investigate the workers' symptoms. Some were forced to drive hundreds of miles north to Michigan to see a specialist in chemical toxicology, simply to be believed and treated. The burden of proving that exposure to the spill and dispersants caused acute and chronic health problems has become yet another ripple in the story, leaving many victims without compensation or closure. The raw pain left in the wake of this disaster remains markedly unresolved, lingering long after the final episode. So go listen to Ripple and hear for yourself the incredible true stories that never made it into the headlines. I loved it. Finally, my third show for today is Lawless Planet on Wondery, hosted by award-winning journalist Zach Goldbaum, who exposes the harms committed to the planet through a true crime lens. He dedicates 2 full episodes to the BP disaster, a unique endeavor for this show so far. Similar to American Scandal and Ripple, Goldbaum skillfully frames these episodes as less of an accident and more of a true crime against the environment. While Part 1 focuses on BP's systemic preference of profit over protection, it's Part 2 that postures a disaster by reframing it as less of singular historical catastrophe, but as part of a broader pattern of environmental wrongdoing and cover-ups. Goldbaum argues that oil spills, toxic chemicals, and industrial pollutants are not isolated accidents or even catastrophic events, but symptoms of a greater criminal negligence paradigm that powerful companies continue to escape accountability for. I'm really enjoying listening to this new series, Lawless Planet, and I strongly encourage you to check out not just the Deepwater Horizon episodes, but all of Lawless Planet episodes. I think they're great. Well, that's a wrap for today's side-by-side-by-side episode of Pod Talk. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, links to today's shows are available in the show notes. So go check them out because you already know I can't highly recommend them enough. For more information about Pod Talk, you can email apodtalk@gmail.com, and that's apodtok@gmail.com, or follow our social at pod.talk on Instagram. And if you like the show, please, please, please give that 5-star rating, as it does help shows get discovered. Please, of course, be sure to share this show with friends, family, coworkers, and anyone who loves a great podcast series. And for the first time, I just want to mention to my Pod Talk listeners, if you don't know this already, I have another show. It might interest you just for fun. It's called Freeport Local, and it's a podcast series that celebrates all things Freeport, Maine, the people, the places, the spaces, the cool events. So if you'd like to check out that show, it can be found in Apple or Spotify. And again, it's called Freeport Local. Well, again, thank you so much for listening today. I hope you have a great one. And of course, happy holidays to everyone. Take care.